All right, so we are on Facebook Live, and I think everything is going well this time with the tech. So thank you, everyone, so much for joining and for being patient. And hi, Lauren. So happy to have you here.
Hi.
So
Thank you so much for having me.
yeah. So I'll kick it off real quick. For anyone who's new or hasn't met me yet, I'm Belma. I'm the founder of Work Bigger. Work Bigger is a new online community and mentorship program with the goal of helping you find the right career path so that you can do work you love and also make a difference in the world. Work Bigger started as a blog in January 2016, and a few months after I started writing, I started featuring a series called Work Bigger Stories, where we feature women who are mission-driven and changing the world by either launching their own companies, redefining work and making work work for them, or aligning with mission-driven organizations. So before I introduce Lauren, just some quick housekeeping. Lauren and I will probably be chatting for about 20 minutes, and then there's some time for Q&A. So definitely share your questions either in the comments in the Facebook Live, where there's a slight delay, or in the Q&A box if you're joining through Zoom. And this will also be recorded, so I'll make sure to share that with anyone who wants the recording after. So yes, today we are featuring Lauren Burke, and I'll do a quick intro, then we'll pass it on to Lauren. But Lauren is incredible, and I'm so honored to have her here today. She is a Forbes 30 Under 30 honoree, an Echoing Green Fellow, a social change writer and speaker, a former professor and attorney, and until 2016, the executive director of the greatest nonprofit there ever was, Atlas DIY. She's also currently the founder of the POS Lab. Welcome, Lauren.
Thanks. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So why don't you just give us some background on your work and your career and your experience? We'll take it from there.
Yes. Sure. So I have this quote that I really love by Aristotle that says, when the needs of the world and your talents intersect, therein lies your vocation. And so, throughout really try not only what the needs of the world are, because there are so many and it's incredibly overwhelming if you think like, what is the biggest problem I can solve? But what my specific talents are to add to that. So I decided to go to law school, in part because I love debating. And ever since I was a little kid, I really loved getting into philosophical arguments and really, pushing forward my beliefs. And while I was there, I had internships working with immigrant populations. I speak Mandarin Chinese. I've lived in China for a number of years and really saw that there was a huge lack of services, not only for Chinese youth in particular, but for immigrants all over. I was really interested in working with young people, in part because I have a lot of energy, so that seemed to sync up really well. And started learning about and working with dreamer youth, so young people who had been here from a very young age, who had no pathway to receiving immigration status because our immigration system is incredibly broken. So in 2010, with some of the young people I was working with, we decided to start a nonprofit called Atlas DIY. So that's why I say it's the greatest one ever. And we really wanted to change up the way that nonprofits were run. Instead of it being really a top-down hierarchical system, which is problematic, not only because of power dynamics, but often because it's white people starting and running organizations, we were founded as a cooperative. So that means that the young people sit on our board. It was founded by 3 young women who are all undocumented immigrants when they came to the United States. Young people work at the center in exchange for services. And they're really the ones hiring, deciding what to do with the budget, all of that. So it created the space for undocumented youth, legal services, after-school activities, college programming, empowerment workshops. We hired the youth. And after doing that for 5 years and doing lots of side hustles, everything from being a law professor to babysitting on the weekends to make that extra money, I decided it was time to step down and step away from Atlas for a variety of reasons, and was planning on sort of stepping away from the immigration movement when the election happened in 2016. And so that sort of shifted everything again.
Yeah.
Which I don't want me to talk about now, or.
Sure. No, actually, I'd love to hear your perspective on it.
Yeah, so I was in the process of starting the Possible Lab, which is a consulting agency that's helping other people figure out how they want to change the world. And I was going to do that full time. I was planning on moving to the countryside away from New York City. And then the election happened, and I was actually at the Clinton headquarters when it happened. I was helping translate for Mandarin speakers who were calling the voter assistance hotline. And I think as for many people, it was probably the most devastating moment of my entire life. 3 days, and then I was sitting at breakfast and suddenly I have a van, and I'm going to drive around the United States, and I'm going to give free immigration legal services to immigrants in rural areas that otherwise wouldn't have access to lawyers, and who are really the targets of hate crimes that are happening right now. So it just like popped into my head, and I contacted my friend Martina, who actually helped found Atlas. She was one of my former clients. She came here when she was 7, undocumented. She was the victim of a serious hate crime. And we were able to get her immigration status. And I said, I think we should get into a van and drive around the country. And her response was the emoji face that looks like this, but is smiling. And she said yes, and we did it. We, raised some money. And we left in January, and I've been on the road since then. We traveled throughout the entire country. I'm now in California. We met with over 1,300 people, worked in detention centers and schools and churches. And that's what sorry, there's a car behind me.
No.
And that's what I've been doing for the past 6 months. So, yeah, and it's been amazing and incredible and really hard also.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all of that. I want to go back to Atlas and when you were working to change how nonprofits were run, because I hear all the time about the challenges of traditional nonprofits. Can you share a little bit about the skill set that you feel came into play to be able to launch a company or a nonprofit that was so different from what's already existing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the first skill that's really important is just like, I would say like chutzpah. And by that, I mean that, you've got to have ovaries to be able to do it. You have to, look at the world and not as it is, but look at it as you want it to be. A lot of people are really, they're very safe in their narrative and their stories. So when you come in and you question people's narrative, you're challenging them, but you're also saying to them, like, maybe the way that you've been doing the things and the way I've been doing things isn't correct. So you have to really be willing to take a lot of people saying like, no, you're crazy. You have to be willing to take a lot of people saying that's impossible. Like I had, like many founders, you have dozens of people saying like, it's just never going to happen. And so that was the first one, is just really saying that I'm going to do it and that I believe this can happen. And the resilience to keep going even if people say no. But the second is to be really rooted in the community that you're trying to serve. I have been working for many years with this community. I think it's problematic when people try to start a nonprofit when they've never really worked on the ground directly. And so whenever I was thinking like, God, is this going to work? I don't know if this is correct. I could always go back to the young people I was co-founding the organization with and like have a real check-in and be like, is this actually what we want to do? And reframe and pivot. Because what I thought Atlas was going to be, a lot of ways were the same, but weren't at the end of the day. And then the last is really being a jack of all trades, or Jill of all trades, I should say. Everything from me I've been working since I was 10 years old. So being like a camp counselor helped in terms of like rallying people, being comfortable. Like I did a lot of acting as a kid. So being okay with public speaking, all those different skills come into play. So just like having a variety of experiences in your life, even if you don't think they're going to connect later on.
Yeah, I love everything you said, from resilience to the Jill of all trades to looking at the world as you want it to be versus the way it is. I think that's really powerful and opens us up to so many different possibilities. Can you, and can you chat a little bit about managing all the side hustles while you are running Atlas?
Yeah. I'm lucky that I have a lot of energy, as I said. But it was like when I was first starting Atlas, I was a full-time attorney at one organization. I actually came to found it because I was really stressed out doing, I I was working with trafficked children. And so I was like, I've got to come up with something that's just fun. So I started a dating blog about dating in New York City, and just wanted to do something that was totally different, that would take my mind off things. And that dating blog ended up getting picked up by the New York Times. And that ended up having people contact me about writing a book, which I didn't want to write a book, but all of a sudden the doors were open because I talked to the young people. I was like, what would we do with $100,000 if I got this book deal? And we said we would start this nonprofit. So it bloomed out of me already having lots of different projects. After I ended my full-time job, we would meet like weekly in coffee shops. At night, we'd meet at McDonald's because sometimes we could only meet at 11 o'clock at night. So that was the place that was open. And after I left my full-time job, I was the legal director at a domestic violence agency, and I became a law professor. And again, I said I was babysitting. And so I think what allowed me to do all those side hustles was like, keep your eye on the prize, kind of. Like, I knew it was all funneling and fueling towards the hope of creating this organization that would open full time. And they were all really interconnected also. Like, I really vocalized when I became the law professor, I said, like, I want my students to be working on real cases, and I want those cases to be cases that will eventually be a part of Atlas DIY. And so it's really about advocating for yourself and what it is that you need, and not just being like, oh, thank you so much for giving me this job, right? It's like, I am a badass, and here's what I'm bringing to the table, so here's what I need you to bring to the table as well.
I love it. I love it. And you said something interesting too about all of your side projects and all the just things that you were managing, which sounds like a lot for any average person. Would you say that they are all rooted in one why or in one focus, even if they were different? Like, is there one thing that you feel drives you more than anything else, or where you feel like that why is sort of the umbrella to all of your projects?
So I like was at this retreat a few years ago, and you had to come up with this like saying for your life. And the one I came up with was, do wonders with the joyous burden that is being human. And I think that's what connects it all. Like, being human, and I know we're going to get into this, can be really tough.
Yeah.
And for me, it's just about that, like, we've got this one life, and not like, what are you going to do with it? But like, how can you make an impact and shape the world? And I say that because, yes, mission is a big part, but a huge part of my life is fun and joy. That's a huge part of Atlas, is we would throw dance parties and, have cheers that we did when we like accomplished tasks. And, like, I connect that to babysitting or being a camp counselor. Like, how can we just like enjoy this experience of being humans also? And then how can we make sure that everybody has the same access to that joy? I spent a lot of time feeling really guilty about the fact that, like, I could take vacations, I could go to the beach, I could go surfing, and not everybody could have those opportunities. And rather than like be stuck in that guilt, which is really unproductive, I just thinking of like, okay, so how can I make sure that young people can also go to like free movie screenings, or how can I get them Broadway tickets, or how can I like teach them how to cartwheel?
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is leveraging that joy, using it for yourself, but then also finding a way to spread it, which is so powerful.
Yes. Thank you for phrasing it. So,
so I want to change directions a little bit now to your Forbes article, if that's okay, because it was incredibly powerful, and I took so many notes just reading through it and was super, super touched by it. So you open up about mental illness, which I think is such an important conversation and one that we don't talk about enough. So I'm going to read a quote that you wrote, and I'm going to try not to butcher it. I summarized a little bit and would really just love to get your take on it from there. But you said, my low points are an endless parade of hopelessness at its worst, of wishing the world would end humanity's suffering, of fighting yourself every day you wake up to get up, take a shower, try and breathe, try and smile, try and act like you believe you have something to live for. So can you just share a little bit about your journey with mental illness and how that's impacted your life, your work, really everything?
Yeah. So I was diagnosed last year, about a year and a half ago, with bipolar 2 disorder. I didn't know before the difference between bipolar 1 and bipolar 2, but so bipolar 2 is more characterized by hypomanic periods with these like longer periods of depression. So I was diagnosed at first with depression in 2008. I had spent the summer working with children diagnosed with HIV and AIDS in China, doing human rights research. And so I was being tracked by the Chinese government. A lot of the kids died by the end of the summer that I had been working with, and came back and really was consumed by those feelings of guilt. As I talked about before, I spent about 2 weeks in bed, really struggling to get up. I like went to a coffee shop once and ordered an iced coffee and then broke down crying because I was like, this iced coffee would pay for the kids' AIDS medication if there weren't pharmaceutical companies and all of that. So I was diagnosed with depression. And for the next 8 years, I sort of went about being like, okay, I'm living with depression. And that's where the quote that you just came from, that's what it would feel like a lot of days waking up and being really frustrated with the point of humanity and the point of existence and thinking like, why even bother to live? In 2010, I started self-harming. So I started, and it's funny, like I'm sure people are listening to this, they're like, wait, 2 seconds ago you were this really bubbly person, right? And that's sort of like what bipolar is also. So part of the reason, and I'm going to get back to the self-harm, but part of the reason why I'm able to juggle so many things in part is my mental illness, because my brain works super fast. My hypomanic periods allow me to get a lot done. And I have these visions of grandeur that like I can do whatever I set my mind to. So when the self-harming started to happen and I was really struggling with alcohol abuse as well, and these huge fits, I think that I took it, and a lot of my friends took it, and I think my therapist took it as just a side effect of stress and the fact that like I was dealing with really hard issues. But because I was so successful, because I was getting like Forbes 30 under 30 awards, I personally felt like these periods were just like a weakness, that I wasn't able to deal with my depression in the way that other people were able to. So then it would become a spiral, right? Because I would be like, something would happen that would trigger me. I would self-harm. Then I'd be mad at myself for self-harming. Then I would do it more. Then I would drink. Like, just became this horrible cycle. Yeah. And I finally last year was in a period of really, really bad depression. And I was like, God, like I've worked on myself. I've been doing all of this and it's still not getting better. And that's when I talked to a new psychiatrist. And she said she thought I had bipolar. And that was really shocking to me. But I went home and I like read all the different things. And I was like, oh my God, all of this is me to a T. And started being treated for bipolar disorder last year. And it's been really amazing. Like for me, it did feel like a whole window was open, particularly that I didn't have to blame myself so much anymore, because I have this thing that I have to deal with. And it gave me a vocabulary to talk about it with, and a support system. So I was actually featured in a documentary this year, came out this year. That was executive produced by Demi Lovato. So that was crazy. I met her. And there are 2 other people in the film that are living with anxiety and depression and schizophrenia. And so now I've become a speaker also about mental health, which is new to me and interesting, but I think so important, particularly for women. We're already worried about seeming like to be too emotional, right? Because that's the narrative that we're told. And so when something is wrong, we really do tend to hide it and push it down. And so for me, I really want to be a voice about how you can be successful and you can, combat things, but also it's really going to suck sometimes.
Yeah. What is the film called? What's the film
It's called Beyond Silence. Yeah, it's called Beyond Silence, and you can share a link. It's Demi Lovato's nonprofit website is called Be Vocal, Speak Up, and so it's located on there, which you can stream for free.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm also, if it's okay, I'm going to share your Forbes article after the call too, just on the Facebook chat, because
it's already public. So
yes. But I just think your story is so powerful, and I love that you're speaking about it openly, because like I said before, I think we need to hear these stories, and I think a lot of people suffer in silence, and a lot of people go undiagnosed too. So,
and
no, go ahead, please.
I think also we're in this age of like perfection, right? And we see successful people and we see their Instagrams and we see them always only on tree pose on the beach, right? And it really creates this facade that in order to be successful, everything has to be perfect. And then once you are successful, everything is perfect. And so I also think it's really important that once we do achieve a certain level of success, that we are open about our struggles so that those successes become more attainable to others.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in the article too, you talked about, I think it was one of your nonprofit members, if I remember correctly, who decided to quit. And it's
Mhm.
because I think she was also suffering with
Yeah.
depression. And you wrote that, it was hurtful to you because you felt like you'd created this idea that we all have to be happy at work. Can you explain
Right.
that story? I feel like, well, I'm not really doing it justice. So I would love to just hear that
Yeah, no,
from.
you're doing a great job. Yeah. Um,
Yeah,
it
and
was
then,
it was one of
sorry,
our
go
young
ahead.
people. Oh, sorry. No, so it was one of the young people who was working at our center who I'd hired to work there. And again, as I said, like we tried to create this happy place at Atlas. We would have cheers when things were achieved and really talked about joy. And she felt like because she was really struggling some days, she was somehow like distracting from our community and by struggling with her own mental illness. And the crazy thing is that I was struggling. I shouldn't use crazy, but the thing is I was struggling with my own mental illness also and would have to take breaks and walk around and some days would come in late to work. But because I wasn't open about that, others only saw me as this like super happy, productive person.
Mhm.
So she felt like, oh God, I'm not that. I'm not what Lauren wants me to be, and I'm not what the community needs. And so that was a really big wake up call for me also about being open about this. I've written other articles about how our willingness to take a low salary makes it difficult for our communities to join the ranks of nonprofit leaders and different barriers to being in this field that exists that we perpetuate. And so, yeah, I thought that was incredibly important and really poignant. And we had a long talk and she was in therapy and she's doing really well now. So
That's
that's really
awesome.
exciting.
Yeah. So for anyone who's going through something similar and they're struggling just with mental illness, or maybe they don't even know that they have depression or um, they don't know that they're bipolar, what would you say? Is there any advice or tips or guidance that you would give someone who's just struggling to feel happy on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. I mean, I think the first is just like accept that you're not going to be happy every day. And that sucks. That's really hard. I still really struggle with that. I still am really frustrated on days that suck because I'm like, why can't everything just be perfect? I use the word perfect a lot. And so first it's like, it's not always going to be that way. There's not like some magical solution that it's like, oh, great, I found the key, right? And then the second is be really honest with yourself. I think that I wasn't honest and open with my therapist and with the people around me, which prohibited me from getting help. Like when I was struggling with alcohol abuse, I didn't talk about it because I was so ashamed. And I think that that shame prohibited me from getting help earlier on. And it's hard. I had a group of friends drop me actually because I wasn't open with them about what I was struggling with. So it just seemed like I was being really dramatic. Obviously those were not the best friends. And so it's okay. But I think like honesty is important, and then finding the right people, for me, finding a therapist was super helpful and necessary, because going at it alone is tough. Being human is hard. This life that we're given, particularly as a woman, particularly with what's going on in the world right now, is really tough. And so, don't try to go it alone. And reach out to those around you. I know all this sounds super cliche, and I'm still really learning on this. Like I'm still far, far away from taking the best care of myself that I could, but I think that those are really important pieces to the puzzle.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, thank you so much. I think we have a few questions coming in, so I would love to open it up to everyone
Yeah.
who's joining. Okay, so this is a question around immigration. Thank you, Magali, for asking this. So going back to your work on immigration, Magali says, from your experience, what percent of our undocumented immigrants would be affected by Trump's latest announcement that they must speak English in order to go through the citizenship process?
Yeah, I thank you for asking that question. And I've been doing these ally trainings around the country also, and there's so many misconceptions about our immigration system that it's incredibly problematic. And even I will wake up every day, I'm like, what is this news piece that came out? So I mean, basically, Trump is talking about creating an immigration system that would be solely based on merit. That would mean that in order to be able to come to the United States, you'd have to prove that you're worthy of it by speaking English, by having these certain skills. Honestly, just talking about it makes my stomach turn and flip flop because other than the dreamer youth, other than the roughly 1.8 million young people who came as children who would qualify under various forms of the DREAM Act, most of the immigrants who are undocumented in this country are undocumented because they had no choice other than to come to the United States without status or overstay visas. Most of them are fleeing horrific violence. I was talking to a woman who I met in North Carolina who fled Guatemala after her son had a gun held to his head by a gang member. And he said, if you don't join our gang, we will shoot you and your family. What choice do you have but to flee? There's a really great quote that says, you have to understand that nobody puts a child in a boat unless the water is safer than the land. Coming to the United States, being undocumented, not speaking English, it's not a fun choice that people make. It's horrific. And all of those people are those who would be impacted, specifically because their life circumstances were so horrible that they had to come. So yeah, if that happens, it will entirely change the makeup of our country. It will entirely change the ethos of our country. I'm sure you saw the press conference where somebody tried to quote the Statue of Liberty and Trump's whoever was like, that was added later. That is rhetoric that is used by white supremacist movements and the alt-right to really try and whitewash this country. I won't stand on my soapbox for too long, but one of the reasons I was actually first interested in immigration is because of the English language only policies that started taking over our country in the year 2000 and seeing the negative impact that had upon children that I was working with within the school system. So to answer the question shortly, it would be the vast, vast majority of undocumented immigrants who are here today and would basically take away any forms of humanitarian relief that we do have for refugees, for asylum seekers, for crime victims, and for survivors of trafficking.
Thank you, Lauren, for sharing that. What can we do to get more involved with the immigration movement?
Yeah, I think that we all sort of want to be have these huge, big actions to take. And the fact of the matter is that we sort of have been sleeping for a long time, and Trump is exploiting a system that we've sort of allowed to get to the point of being exploited. So, definitely get involved, call your senators, all that stuff. But two really important things are, the first, which is really simple, is download or print out or buy one of those posters that says refugees welcome here. There's a really great one that says Black Lives Matter, love is love, science is real, no humans illegal. And put those out in your window if you live in the city. Put it out in your front yard. I can't tell you how many people I've met who said I feel unwelcome. And walking around and seeing those signs, if you own a business, putting in the window really not only gives comfort to those who are being attacked right now, but also shows the bigoted individuals who unfortunately are coming out in droves right now that they're not in a safe space to be bigoted, to perpetuate hate. So that's the first one. And the second one is getting involved in volunteering with local organizations that do things like ESL classes at night for adults. Going in and even teaching a class once a month is hugely important, and shows again that not only are you willing to be in the trenches with individuals, but also provides everybody, if you're on this call, you speak English. That is a huge need that immigrants have. And so that's a skill and a tool that you already have that can be applied right away. And then the third thing I would say is sign up with United We Dream. They're a national-based organization that's run by and for undocumented young people, and you can sign up to get text alerts with action items that you can do every day. So those are the three things I would say.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna provide a recap of that in our Facebook group, which I think everyone who's on the Zoom call is, except maybe Cheryl. I don't know if we've connected offline, so definitely feel free to email me, and would love to invite you into the group, but then also share those resources because, yeah, I think this is so important to act on right now. And I'm just grateful that you're sharing all of this information. I also come from an immigrant family. I wasn't born here, so the immigration movement is just really close to me as well. So just thank you for all the work you're doing in that space.
Yeah, of course. And I just, want to add that like what I'm going to be doing next with the Possible Lab is really working with people on how they can make a difference in the world, either through starting a nonprofit, through starting a social change organization. If you work at a company, how can you get more involved in a local level? So while immigration is hugely important, and I obviously think it's one of the most important issues, every person has a skill that they can apply to an issue in the world right now. So just want to say that.
Yeah, absolutely. And is it the posslab.com or is it the Possible Lab?
No, yeah. So it's thepossiblelab.com. The name of the organization is The Possible Lab, but the website is theposslab.com. Small hint to all of you who are thinking about starting something or buying a domain name. If you search for a domain name and don't buy it right away, there are these trolls who will go and buy it and then will try to hold you hostage. So I didn't buy the Possible Lab right away. So somebody owns it. So it's theposslab.com. And people can email me at lauren@theposslab.com.
Yeah, lauren@theposslab.com. Thank you. Yay, you're the best. This has been just such a pleasure talking to you. And I don't see any questions come in. I do have one final question, if that's okay. Let me just check the Facebook Live real quick because I know we have a few people in there. Oh, well, yeah, I don't see anything right now. But any other advice just for our group here, for women who are looking to be more mission driven and to feel more connected to their work, but they're really struggling right now. They hate their 9-to-5s and are super over it, but they want to do something that helps make a difference in the world. Any tips or guidance for them?
A lot. So let me try to think if I can put it succinctly. I mean, I think the first one is to recognizing, and this is, maybe silly, but I think a lot of people don't get involved in impacting the world because they don't believe that they can make a change and that they can make a difference. And so the first is just that you can. My favorite book about this is called You Are a Badass. It's a really awesome book that I recommend everybody to read that kicks me in the ass every time I read it still. And so that really helped me a lot. But just recognizing that you can be the change and you are the change for individuals. And so building up that self-confidence. The second is don't feel and the hard. Set your mind to be this is going to be tough, but here's what I want to do and what I want to be. I have Post-it notes and quotes up over my mirrors and in my home, just as daily reminders to myself. And I think the third is be honest and be authentic. If you feel like you have to do something, you're not going to do it. So I hate running. I think it's stupid. I always played sports as a kid. And so if I'm not running after a ball to score a goal, I'm what? But I used to not work out because I was I'm supposed to run. And you see all these really cool people with their cute outfits running. And so I had to find a way to have physical activity that wasn't that, even though I felt like I should do it. So, I mean, the one is stop shoulding all over yourself, right? I love that idea also. And that can be applied to anything. I know people that are in mission-driven organizations and working on international conflict and genocide because they think that's the most important, but they hate it and it doesn't click with them and it's really tough. And you don't need to be miserable to change the world. I think that's also you don't have to be poor to change the world. You don't have to be sad all the time. You can find happiness and light even in really dark and hard circumstances. So I think those would be my 3, which were stop shitting all over yourself, be confident you are a kick-ass individual, and you can be happy and do it at the same time.
Oh, thank you. I feel like that's just the perfect note to end this conversation on. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This is great. And I'm happy to answer other questions that people have. And please feel free to check out my website, also thepauselab.com.
Awesome. Yes. And I'll share all of your information on the Facebook thread. And I'm going to share this recording and our Facebook page on the blog. And Lauren, I'll send it to you as well, too, because there's so much good stuff here. And I would love for you to share it. So yeah, thank you. Absolutely. Thank you so much for all your time.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Yay. Bye. Bye.